Hello, everyone. Leslie M. Thornton, Hypnosis for Permanent Weight Loss. Have another, I think you guys might be my first duo on the podcast at the same time. Woo!
Yeah.
That's fun. Hypnosis for Permanent Weight Loss podcast listeners get a duo today, so get excited. I was just on these lovely ladies' podcasts a few weeks ago, and I'm going to formally introduce them with the introduction that I have for them here, so I can be just understood who these ladies are. So Rachel Brooks and Erin Klein. Rachel is a fitness lifestyle entrepreneur, author, podcaster, and speaker with a mission to empower women to become their best selves through the practice of creating a positive mindset, a healthy body, and a soul filled with love and gratitude. Erin is the founder of Moms Just Want to Have Sun, where her mission is to help women maintain their badass goal, crushing self as you can take on motherhood. Together, Rachel and Erin host the Confident Woman podcast, where they show up as their true, authentic, transparent, and vulnerable selves and talk about everything, including confidence, body image, relationships, business, finances, fitness, freedom, travel, and fun, all rolled into one. So they have a Confident Woman community on Facebook. You can also find them on Instagram. Ladies, thank you so much for being here today and for the good vibes you're putting into the world.
Thanks. I'm excited.
Yes. Thank you for having us. This is it's fun to come back, full circle here. So we're definitely excited to dive into today's chat, because I know that our chat was so good. We needed to continue it.
Yeah, I love it. Exactly. That's the same way that I felt. It was like, okay, we got to keep this going. So I'm glad that our listeners get a chance to meet you gals as well. So I think your guys' story will be really powerful as a way to start off. Maybe Rachel and then Erin, if that works.
Sure. Yeah. So kind of, sum up what Leslie had just mentioned. I have been an entrepreneur for 15 plus years and really got heavily involved into the lifestyle aspect of it, because somebody, for me, I had chased perfection. Hence the title of my book was Chasing Perfection. And I was very rigid and extreme and just, had to have everything black and white. So when I started to lean into this whole new, flexibility aspect of it, getting really crystal clear on who I am and what's holding me back, it allowed room for flexibility and freedom. And I realized that I savor that more than anything else in life right now. And just, it's a beautiful thing, because when you could come full circle and stop that chase and stop feeling like you have to have that pressure nonstop to be enough, to do enough, to have enough, and just lean into the current, this present being, you feel like this ignition of confidence and self-worth and value. And it's something that I feel so called to do, to empower and give back to other women. For many of us, we tend to get stuck in whether it is in our fitness path, whether it's our personal, professional, relational areas. We look at it from a holistic approach. And so, we really wanted to close that gap and provide a space and a community for women to show up and talk about the real hard things, and just have that safe space to share the vulnerable conversations that really need to take place. And that's where we started the Confident Woman podcast. And, our mission there is to keep it real, raw, and relatable, to help close that gap so that every woman who is walking, their path and their journey knows that they're not alone. And so this is really what the embodiment of what we do with the Confident Woman brand, the Confident Woman podcast, the Confident Woman community, and the Confident Woman collective. So it's kind of a little snippet of what it is, for somebody who had been so on all the time, to finally just not feel like the pressure is on them, but just be more in that presence.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And before we get into talking with Erin, I'll just share really quick that yesterday I had a guest. She was actually a previous surgeon, and she actually quit when COVID came about, because it just got so intense. And she just said, I'm on the wrong path. And her, she actually gained a bunch of weight, which, she had been kind of blaming on menopause, but then realizing that it was so much more than that when she actually dove in. But one of the things that we were talking about yesterday was how, just in general with society, how men, it's like, men don't cry kind of thing or whatever. But then the other flip side of the coin was like, women are, stereotypically like over emotional, and how, when we're trying not to be that, how we'll like just push it all under the rug to try to look strong and to never, and that was always me, of being the emotional rock of the family, or just always trying to hold it together so I don't look bad, or whatever, the perfectionist part of me that wants to, right, appear a certain way or whatever to myself and others, and then it's like, well, where do those emotions go, and how painful it can be to actually have. And then it's this internal negative dialogue happening all the time, versus that safe space to actually talk about, like you said, those things that are really hard, and acknowledge them, and shine the flashlight on them, and start to heal. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And Erin, how about you? I don't even know how you guys ended up partnering up. I'd love to know that
Let
as
me
well.
tell ya.
Yes, tell us.
we have
you.
a kind of a funny story, but Erin will lead in with her introduction anyway, and then we can talk about how we met.
Yeah. Got lots of stories I can tell you, know? No, so I love when you're just saying that, because when you talk about like being emotionless, like I feel like that was like my badge of honor for so long. Like it was, I don't know if it's just growing up being the athlete basketball player, like always like, cry on the inside like a winner, right? Like don't be vulnerable. Don't show anybody, right? You don't want your opponent to see any of your weaknesses, anything like that. And so I think that always carried in. And I started when I was in college, I actually started in the network marketing industry. And I was in that industry for 15 years. So that's a really long time. And anybody that knows anything about that industry, it can be a mental swear word. It can be. And so kind of like the same thing there, where it was just kind of that drilled into, don't quit, don't do, whatever it takes, right? But whatever. So I think that just going along the way, for me, my huge reoccurring theme in life is just always identity crisis. It seems to be like trying to figure out who I am, where I am, at what point in this life, and realizing that I don't have to pick one thing at one time, right? That I can, we're women, we do lots of things and wear many hats, especially throw in wife, mom, all that kind of stuff. So I think for me, the biggest thing I love about what we started with the Confident Women podcast and talking about these things is that what you notice is that it's every woman has these issues, but it's like not cool to talk about, right? And so it's like we wanted to have something where we could have everyday women, but right, successful women, everyday women, because we all go through the same thing and just learn from each other. And I remember like hearing other speakers, or you get into like the personal development space and you listen to like these big names people, and it's like, gosh, it's so easy for you to say right now. So I just like that connection of, we're all going through different things, or we've all gone through similar things, right? We each have our own unique story. But there's underlying themes that we can learn from each other about and grow from within each other, instead of trying to do it by yourself, which I still struggle with. I'm such a like, I'll figure it out on my own kind of person. So that's a challenge, just kind of like leaning in and accepting support of other people when it's available to you. Sometimes I think it is readily available, but we don't want to accept that. So that's where I was. And I actually, so fun story how Rachel and I met. We did I was going to a bunch of networking groups. My husband's from Nebraska and we live in Ohio. So when we first got married, he's like, I don't know anybody in the city. Like I need to get to know people. And so we would go to these networking groups, and then we decided to start a networking we did just like a book thing for like 21 Laws of Leadership or something like that. And through that meetup, I met a woman who was hosting her own meetup, and it was like all these like women empowerment meetups. And I was like, gosh, I don't know if I want to go to a women's empowerment meetup, but I'm going to go because she's cool, and so it was at that meetup that Rachel and I met. So I think there's like 6 or 7, and we just started chatting and talking and connecting. And it's funny because when you're like in your 30s as women and you make new friends, it's like weird. It's like, oh, we're going to go to dinner, and then like, we're going to go grab drinks. And then like, I remember like calling my husband on the way home and be like, I think she likes me. like you're dating. It's like weird, but that's how her and I kind of got started. And then when we were talking about, some of this stuff, especially too in your 30s, right? Like when Rachel and I met, it's like, it was pretty straightforward. Like, here we are when you're that age. I'm like, I'm not into superficial BS. Like, here's what's going on in my life. Here's where I'm at. Here are the things I want. You either want to be my friend or you don't at that point. And then our conversations just got really real and raw from the beginning. And we were like, we should be recording these because I bet other women feel the same way. And so At least that's my perspective, Rachel.
Yeah, very much so. It was very similar. And it's funny because how I even got into Meetup, we met on meetup.com kind of just through those other women's meetup groups. But, like her husband is from Nebraska. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. I moved to Columbus. I also didn't know anybody. And so I was just told, like, oh, well, go on meetup.com. You're going to find some friends. I'm like, I don't even know what this is, but sure, I'll go on. And I remember creating my meetup.com profile. And it was just one of those things like, I'm Rachel Brooks. I like long walks on the beach kind of thing, like it sounded like a classified ad.
Yeah.
And I hit publish and I just like hoped and prayed. I was like, I hope somebody likes me. I hope somebody's going to be my friend. And the next morning I woke up and there was like, I don't even know, like 70 something requests. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these friends that want to be my friend. And it turned out that I actually had created a meetup group and I was now the leader. And they were coming for me and my group. And I'm like, I don't even know anything. Like, I have no idea how to be a leader. I don't know anything about Columbus. I don't even know these women. Like, I don't even know me. And so it was just kind of like this moment. Do I just shut Meetup down and delete it? Or I can own it and figure it out as I go. So I was figuring out as we go. I had no idea. And so after a few meetups, I was like, you know what? I should probably go to a few other meetups to see how they're run and what they are. And it was at that meetup I met Erin. And like she said, there was several other ladies there. And I think it was at one point, Erin, I made, like, maybe this is your memory of it too, but something was said at the table and we both like leaned into the table and then we were the only two leaning in and we looked at each other and we're like, yeah. And so it was almost like that instant connection. And I just remember that girl's cool. Like I gotta, chat with her later. And so, like she said, we went out a couple days later on our first date and it was supposed to be for lunch. And then like several hours later, our husbands are calling us like, are you okay? What's going on? And we're both like
several flights of wine later.
Right. And I think we both said like, they're, opposite of each other, but like, she's so cool. I think she's my friend. And it's like what you said, women in our 30s, we, it really is. It's like, you got to date. So it takes several occasions to meet and build that deep, meaningful connection. But like you said, Leslie, it's like women are going too emotional, but it's that investment where we pour into people where it's so much harder for women versus men who are just like, you like sports and beer's cool. They're my best friend. It's like, they don't get to that deeper level. And even though Erin said she's, coined that term of emotionless, but she had that same experience, is that she didn't know if I was her friend and we had to keep going on a couple of dates, but we both knew at the same time, like, this is a person we want to, do friendship and life with. And so here we are.
Yes. I love that. Soulmates. And I can totally relate to the making friends at 30. And for those people listening, I have a lot of listeners who might be more in their 50s or 60s. Meetup.com. That was definitely a place that I went and had a few meetup groups. I had like solo entrepreneurs. I like acquired it from somebody for Albany, New York. I still have it. And then ecstatic dance. I used to run an ecstatic dance in Albany, which is like a meditative, nonverbal, judgment-free dance thing. And that got a lot of traction. So great place to meet people. And yes, super, I recently just met a new girlfriend on Bumble BFF.
You've done that.
Right?
Yeah, I've done Bumble.
Yeah. So it's like, I just put myself on the BFF part because I'm back where, in Albany, New York. And I was like, all right, well, I need to establish some new friends, because I realized I was still like on Facebook, like a little bit on the radar for like high school friends. I was like, why am I doing why would I still be friend? Like, I need to attract like what my vibe is, So I put myself on there. And this one girl, she like connected with me and she was like sending me all these messages. And then I was just like, okay, great. When should we meet? Was like the first message I sent back to her. And so later when we met and we hit it off like really, really, really well, like right away. But so we've had like laughs about how like she was chatting and she was like, I thought for sure as soon as I met you, you were going to try to sell me something because of how fast you were like, let's meet up. And I was like, I thought for sure you were like half deep into 3 bottles of wine because of how many messages you were sending me.
It can be scary.
Anyway, it's weird, right? It's like, but I totally can relate to that instant connection and like the dates necessary to like establish, like, are we really on the same page? Like, but you do know right off the bat if it's somebody that you should be hanging with. So appreciate that story. And I think it'll inspire a lot of people because, I think a main part of, for my, tribe is the recovery out of weight loss. And for you guys, like perfectionism, obviously coming out of that and building confidence, part of that is so much your community and who you're hanging out with and surrounding yourself with people that bring you up and make your energy awesome and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm curious, I have a question for you too, is like, how would you, as the owners of the Confident Woman podcast, define confidence? What is confidence? Yes.
Well, glad you asked. I think confidence is owning everything about who you are, good, bad, all the things, and being happy with yourself regardless. So I feel like most people everyone has an insecurity, right? But how do we view ourselves and portray ourselves and talk to ourselves about those anyway, right? And whether they exist, they're going to exist, but we know they're there. But how do we continue on and continue to be the best person we can despite of those weaknesses that we have? Would be my short-term. That'd be my short-term definition, I guess. A long-term one would take a little bit, but
I think that's, thank you. I love that one.
Yeah. And I would say it's, having faith in yourself and in your creator and knowing, that's the embodiment of owning who you are and whose you are and what you're fully capable of, being, doing, and having, right? It's that full holistic, approach to who you are. And so I think with confidence, it's not something you can just go pick off the shelf. It's something that really is instilled and you constantly have to practice it. It's a practice,
right.
But it's about showing up and giving it your best. And despite all the things that could go wrong, it's having faith that you'll make it through, that you're confident that this will, turn out to the best of what is your ability and what is, promised to you.
Oh, it's awesome. I love that. Yeah. And that even just opens it up because I think, so many people will even say about me, like, oh my gosh, like you're so confident and all of this kind of stuff. And it's just like, with that perfectionist part still, having its way about it, it's just like, and where's the room for me to get to be, vulnerable and having that, especially being a leader and, someone that people really look up to in that way. So it's that like healthy balance. So how do you guys find that you balance that with profession, but obviously you're also modeling like to not be okay, but you want people to still like trust you as the example for, who to look to for confidence. How does that work?
Yep. So I think confidence, like what you were saying, when people are telling you how confident you are, I think it's because you've done things and you've messed up a lot and you build confidence, right? So I think some people don't build confidence because they're too afraid to try or do anything, right? So they've had these ideas, they've wanted to do this, they've had this goal, but they've been too afraid to ever try. So they've never done anything. So of course you're going to lack confidence because you've never had, right? Like I know my confidence comes from, I've screwed up a lot and I'm still here to talk about it. So clearly, right? It's like messing up over and over and over again. Right. Does that make sense? So like
that's
you build
awesome.
your confidence through failing and messing up. So I think that's what helps kind of be relatable with other people is, if anyone asks about my story or any of my past, it's full of failure and messing up over and over again and going through situations that were very humbling and everything. So that gives people that courage and that inspiration to take that step, because if they fail, so what? So did everybody else. So I think that part, and then still just being honest enough to be with people to know that like, I'm still going, I go through stuff all the time. Like I'm challenged every day. And there's times where I'm like, I want to stay in bed all day and not face what I got to do. But again, that's when I can look back at my track record and be like, okay, like gotten through everything up until this point so far. So I'm not doing anybody any favors by quitting now. Right. So it's just like you're like Rachel said, it's a confidence. You don't just become confident and then that's it for life. It's a confident practice. It's a practice for life. So I think that's a way to stay relatable. Is reminding people.
Yeah. And it reminds me of one time I was getting coaching and I was saying something about like, well, why would they, listen to me or, this, I made all these mistakes and this is what happened. Like the first thing, like then, I took that risk and then it blew up in my face and like whatever. And like what she mirrored back to me was like, yes, but like what that paints is this picture of unstoppability.
Yeah.
Like in the face of no agreements, right? You just kept going, like you just never stopped. And so that's what I'm hearing you say is like, it's really that, like it's unstoppability. And that's really what people, go after. And I think, leadership today, luckily is starting to talk about vulnerability with Brene Brown kind of revolutionizing that and everything on how, that really is true leadership, is to also share when things do break down. And I made lots of mistakes in my, leadership journey or learning how to be a coach of like how to share and when to share, because, because, the whole, like, don't share until you've really overcome that thing versus like necessarily sharing while you're in the mess or the whole, cause that could get in the way. But, yeah, it's this whole new revolution of leadership happening. But yeah, I appreciate that.
And kind of the piggyback off of what she was saying, I think, prior to, like you had just said, there's this revolution where we're starting to see more vulnerability and more relatability. But I think even from my own experience, and this is partly with like when we started the podcast, was like, we see leaders out there and they're just on this pedestal. And it's almost like this gap becomes so unachievable. We'll never get to that success level because they never mess up. They never show their insecurities or their vulnerabilities or their failures or mishaps. And it creates this gap and it becomes so crushing on that person who's looking up to them and saying, well, there's no way I can ever be like that because look at my mess. I can never get there. So, for me, when again, we started this, was like, I wanted to kick those legs out of that pedestal and help close that gap and bring it down to knowing that woman doesn't matter. You can get to chapter 20 in a book when you're starting out, but let me show you how. And there's going to be that messy middle because I too had struggled with it. So let's, take your hand and come through and we'll lead you to it. And so it helps close that gap because again, when that woman feels that she is seen and heard, she's validated and she's supported, and she knows too, then that somebody's pouring into her with belief and encouragement, that she is able to get to that other side and have hope and have faith and have confidence that she can have the life and dreams that she desires that are within her. So, confidence again is taking those, daily practice and stepping stones to lay out in front of you. And so when you look back at your track history, it depends on which lens you want to view it from. Is like the lens of failure and just say, well, I failed every single time, so I might as well just give up. Or you can look at the lens and say, you know what, I've achieved actually a lot of things in my life, so I choose to focus on those areas of my competence versus, the areas of insecurity and just saying, I don't have all the things. None of us have all the things. None of us do. It's about just doing the best you can with what you have, but also, again, having faith that you have gotten this far in your life that you can overcome the next challenge or hurdle that lies ahead. So it's all about this encompassment. So, with what Erin and I talk about, and even from my own, I mean, my whole book, the Chasing Perfection, A Journey to Healing, Fitness, and Self-Love, it's a journey. I am so real, raw, and relatable in that book. It was just, I can't believe that I poured out my soul like that. And it was just, I have no idea how it was going to be received, but it was something that was instilled in me. And so I felt called to just share it. And, if it helped one person, cool. If it didn't, at least it helped me because I was able to now see how much, you can overcome and now give back. And that has been a mission and my purpose in life is to give back.
It's amazing. Absolutely. So many gems there. One of the things I was thinking about was I have a client who, when we first started talking about, where he was at, he was saying how when he was an athlete, played sports all like growing up, and then he was in college, and then he said as soon as he stopped playing sports and he finished college, then all of a sudden he just was like really depressed, really anxious, right? Like just was like in this like total negative headspace. And I've seen this before. I actually dated someone in the past who like, he played sports, all growing up. And that was like his identity, and that like everything is like there, that container of support. And then, and saying like, and he was basically still in this mindset of like, there must be something wrong with me because left to my own devices, I, hate myself and my life and all this negative kind of mental chatter. And what I kind of mirrored to him though was like how all human beings, when left to their own devices, will go down the negative track. Like that's just the way that our brains are made, right? To like focus on that. And it's just like all that's missing is like you just don't have the tools for how to actually change what you're saying to yourself or to work with your emotions on your own. Right? Like you had from such an early age, this container that like is very similar to, an AA container or a coaching container, right? Where there's community, there's faith, there's support, there's physical activity, right? There's the structure, there's the games, there's the practices, right? Like there's this system that keeps us sane. Right. And so I think it's just so important for people to like get that and understand that, like to normalize the fact that like, if you're feeling negative, if you're thinking bad thoughts, if you're, whatever, it's not necessarily, there's nothing that's wrong with you. You're actually normal. But same as I was saying to that guy, like, it's just, we need to actually teach you how to be able to create that for yourself. And for this person in particular, he's an entrepreneur, he's a business owner, like, which can be a lonely, isolated world where you're, don't have those things in place. So I just think the importance of normalizing that.
Yeah.
There's also something else around failure that you had talked about that kind of rung a bell for me, but I think it was just, I know. So in, the conversations that I have with primarily women all the time about, obviously coming to hypnosis for permanent weight loss, they've tried everything else up to this point. They've already done it all, and it's just like, and then they get to the point of like about to embark on this journey with hypnosis for permanent weight loss. And they're just like, I don't know, like I've done so many things, like, how am I going to waste my money again at something else that blah, blah, blah. And like you were saying, it's just like, instead of, what if you looked at all of the things that you've done in the past, not as failure, but it's like, you had success with every single one of those things that you did. Yeah, it didn't last long term, right? It still left you, but it served you in that moment. It was, as I always say, like, consider the fact that you had to go through all of those different diet plans or programs before you'd be ready for this one. Right. And maybe there'll be something after this, who knows? But when you change the lens from, because I've done all of that and spent all this money, I'm a failure, to I'm unstoppable, like we're talking about, and I'm never going to give up until I find a real solution to not have to be obsessed about food, body, and weight anymore, then that's when the chapter can begin. And that's in hypnosis for permanent weight loss. We're reprogramming your brain to start seeing that, you're unstoppable, that you're confident, that you're, can be vulnerable, that you're safe to share, blah, 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 all the things that make it so that the diet mentality of black and white thinking and all or nothing, and all the pass fail mentality, morality, like all of these things that just color our entire lives get to actually, go away. And then it's like, no matter what you do after this program, you'll always see yourself as awesome because you learned how to like see yourself that way here. Right. So enjoy life now.
Right.
Is our goal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
that confidence.
We get so focused on the problem that we lose sight of solutions, and we are the solution, but we are also the problem if we choose to stay stuck. So, we got to pick our heads up, and we have to, like what Erin was even saying earlier about being open to receiving the outside support and help, because there's so many people out there that are willing to help and support you from a place of genuine, investment in you.
Yes.
But it does take for you to get out of your own way and just say yes. Like sometimes you might not even believe in yourself that you're even worth that investment or worth the change or worth, even trying. But yeah, if you have somebody rooting for you in your corner, just like, or maybe you are the only person, it's something that you didn't do. So you should try it, because if you look at your track history, and if you're looking at through the lens of failure, you failed at this, you failed at this, you failed at that, right? But here's something you hadn't tried. So maybe, just maybe, that might be the opportunity to make change and reclaim your life and get back on track and start making that headway that you long for.
Exactly. I always like say to people, like, just ask as many questions as you need. Like, I remember, when I was recovering out of diet mentality and like wanted to go into intuitive eating, but like I had this belief stuck in my brain that I still couldn't understand. I was like, but I know all the science about food addiction and I understand it. So like the sales call for the program didn't like help me with that one.
Yeah, right.
You know, and they were just going to like, you know, they're like, you know, anybody trying to build a business and, you know, whatever, like they weren't the most amazing salesperson in the world, but like I wanted the transformation. So I called the salesperson back up. I'm like, what can you tell me about this sugar addiction though? That's the thing that's in my way. You know, it's just like, ask the questions that has you get sold to. You know, it's like, let them say the answer to you, because what that answer could be of what could be blocking you could be the thing that allows you into that next level of transformation. And it was for me, because what she really said to me was like, well, we really see that just by believing the thought that you're an addict, all of your behaviors follow that.
Right.
And so we need to work on that belief, and we need to work on what, you know, and then you get that freedom. And that just made every piece of sense to me, because I already knew about hypnosis and understanding the unconscious mind and how beliefs are and everything. And I'm like, yes. So it's like, you know, just the supporting of anybody listening of like, call it to you. Like, don't wait for life to happen to you. It's like, bring it forth, you know, like take the action and go for it. Because you know, I have friends who are also in the same, really, it was like no sugar, no flour, weighing and measuring all your food, like super strict food program. I was in it for 3 years. And even to this day, because I did that, because I brought the program to me and I made them tell me what I needed to hear so that I could completely go all the way into their belief system on intuitive eating. You know, it was like I'm so much farther, and I've completely healed my relationship with food, body, and weight. I can say, I couldn't always say that every step of the way in my path. I was always getting there. Yeah. I can 100% say that now. And like, they're still struggling. Right. You know, my friends that are still, you know, they're working on it every day, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's like, I say to people, you know, before they embark on the journey, it's like, you know, you can keep doing it this way and like, you'll be fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with the way that you're going. But what if in 8 weeks, you literally didn't have to think about this anymore? Like food, it was not an issue for you anymore. Would that be worth, you know, this to you? And it's just like, that's the choice, you know? And it's like, that's the choice for every coaching container, is like, we've been working on this for however many decades, all of us, you know, it's like, well, we can give you everything in 8 weeks or whatever. Right. Your program is. So.
I can, yeah. I mean, I could be a testament to not necessarily because I have not gone through Leslie's program, but the fact that I had struggled with body dysmorphia, eating disorders, self-image, self-esteem, yo-yo dieting extremes, all that stuff, right? For decades. And I could say right now, it's been, so we're in 2022 now. It's been a full decade that I have been free from all of that stuff. And it's about reclaiming your life. So when you start looking at things from a diet perspective, diet has that, you know, connotation. It's like messing my words up. Synonymous with suffocation, restriction, willpower. You can't have these things. And so what happens? We want more of it. So when we reframe what we believe about diet, which is just diet, if you look it up, it's just, you know, food and beverages consumed. But we need to reframe what we believe about it and the connotations, because like you said, we adhere to those beliefs and they become attached to our identity. So when we start flipping the script and look at it from now, okay, well, what if I don't have to diet anymore, but I can create a sustainable lifestyle? A lifestyle is forever. And so, you know, for having come full circle on this, you know, 10 years later, I don't struggle with dieting and extremes and, you know, have to write everything down and freak out. I mean, I haven't dieted other than my competitions in over 10 years. Obviously, yeah, there's a process for bodybuilding and competitions. But other than that, I haven't. And it's just been so freeing that you can step into something and just not let that consume you, because what we consume, right, is going to come out of us in different facets. So it's just, you know, we got to look at things from a different perspective and ask yourself, really, you know, get really clear on what it is you truly want. Do you want to just lose that 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is? Or do you actually never want to diet again? And you just want to wake up every day feeling optimally your best, and knowing that every day is an opportunity for, you know, show up, you know, be the best, have a lifestyle, sustain that, and never have to let these things consume you. When I looked at it, I was like, I want that option. And so that was the choice that I was set out. Instead of, I don't care about the scale and the weight and all this stuff. It's now about building that sustainable lifestyle. But I will say, I mean, there's days that I honestly do struggle. their struggle, I look in the mirror and I do not like what I see. There are days I'll look at my plate and be like, no, I'm grossed out by it, or I can't eat it because I feel like it's going to pain me a little bit. But those moments are so few and far between that they're just fleeting seconds almost. So I would never say that there's anyone who's fully overcome. They have just now been equipped with the tools to manage it. And that's the beauty of it, is like, you can now recognize it and say, not today, this is not going to consume me and send me off in the wrong path again. So just kind of my 2 tidbits, because I can attest to what that is when having an adherence to creating a lifestyle versus dieting.
Yeah, I think that's an important point of just like, and that's what I was just talking to a client the other day. I would like, you know, she's still in the part of learning where it's like the what is it, the conscious, right, where you're like very aware and like you're focused on it, whatever. So she's like paying attention to like all of her decisions and all of the feelings that she feels after and all of the different things, and is this okay and is this not okay, and what do I do about this? And I was just like, yeah. And then eventually you get to that place where it's the conscious competence, right? And then you get to the place where it's the unconscious competence. And I think that that's exactly right. It's like, you know, the unconscious competence is like, it's just like, I might have like, it's such a fleeting thought. I don't even know that it's happening, because like, as soon as I think it, it'll just be like, no, I don't care. Like, move on. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like that quick. So yeah, it just becomes, a normal thing like that. Yeah. And Erin, I'm curious, with your journey with perfectionism and obviously being, you know, and I've been in multi-level marketing stuff too on my path. And, you know, just that, like, you know, how to keep going and all of that kind of stuff. What was your experience with like perfectionism or being hard on yourself?
I would say, when I started network marketing, like I hit ranks pretty quickly. And then, you know, one of the wonderful things is all the recognition that you get and people talk about, right? And it like, it's a big ego booster is what it is. You feel really damn good about yourself and you kind of get addicted to that feeling. And so, I think that was like, the hard part was just always feeling like you had to be like, I couldn't say if you had a bad month or bad things happened. It's hard to go into this without going into a lot of network marketing, because it is definitely like that toxic positivity, right? As far as like, there's no talking about problems. There's nothing bad is happening here. Like everything's good all the time, kind of stuff. And so, so that can get difficult, because it's, you know, you want to have that real raw and like be vulnerable and be open and I feel like I didn't make friends, right? Like everyone in your team, you're supposed to be your friends, but they weren't my friends because they never knew what the hell was going on in my life, because I had to portray this persona of, on this level, I do this, I do this. So, because it's like, why would they want to try and reach the rank I've reached if life's still shitty then, you know? Like, so it's like, you got to portray this image of everything's wonderful all the time. And if something's wrong in your life, it's because you're not at this level. That's the key, you know? So, so it is, it's just a big mind game, that whole
versus making it really normal, that like part of the growing process, like part of getting to whatever rank is usually going through hard stuff. It has to be, it's impossible.
Right. And it's just, and like, I just feel like too, like, even like my whole experience with 15 years there was just like, it's hard. It's just, I don't feel like there's very much realness there. I feel like people are really good at pretending to be real and caring, but then it's like people that, you know, I worked with for that entire 15 years, it's like, I don't really know them, you know?
Yeah. My experience is like very robotic. I did isogenics and, it was just, I never was like super into it. I probably was, you know, like doing it for 5 years. I was still working as a nurse. So I wasn't like, I never like moved up ranks or anything like that. But, you know, I did, yes, the morning calls and the like, you know, the leaders of the whatever team. And I don't know, just that whole thing. It's just like, I mean, it is contagious, the energy on those calls of just being like, you know, and it does amp you up or whatever, but I think that that's like a major thing that's missing with any kind of success type of coaching. It's just like, well, how did you get to be that way? What exactly are you doing? Or like,
Yeah.
can you normalize the fact that like you don't wake up happy and energized every morning, like ready to save the world? Like, come
Right.
on, there's
Something
no way.
happens. Well, I like
Right.
too, when you were talking about that guy in the beginning too, that was like an athlete and stuff. I think
Mhm.
that's like a big thing with, for me, right? It was like I go from playing sports my whole life, being part of a team, striving for importance, right? Where it's like that fills in a lot of gaps for people, where it is like, oh, I have a team I'm a part of, and we're encouraging each other, and we're in this together kind of thing. So I feel like a lot of athletes, like probably isogenics for sure, since it's a supplements, but like a lot of, you know, former athletes kind of get drawn in by that team
Right.
aspect. Like they miss being part of a team and going after something. And that was what it was for me. I just loved the team, and I loved the, you know, and they make you feel really damn good about yourself, right? So it's kind of like you get that false sense of, you know, wonderful and amazement. And then it's like like you're a mini celebrity sometimes. Like that's how I felt. I felt like I loved going to events because people knew who I was, and like, you know, and it's like you feel great, but then it's like not real, you know. Parts are parts, but it's not all the time. Like it's such a,
well, it becomes so much pressure, you know,
right,
to
that's the
always have
word,
to,
pressure to maintain that.
and
of,
and being on the top like that, and you know, whatever, and having to like hold this stamina. It's like, where's my safe place to be a human being, you know, like who can I talk to? It can feel so challenging. And
right, because it's always leave your problems in the car, and you're right. It's like, okay, well, I gotta drive that car. It's getting hard to like press the gas pedal because there's so many problems in the back I haven't addressed yet. So
absolutely.
but
Yeah. And most of my clients, you know, are professionals and women, and you know, they've and that's the thing, is there's so much shame behind it, of like asking for help, and like showing that you are really dealing with stuff. But like, yeah, they're all dealing with stuff, because the same skills that got people to be as successful as they are is the same thing that's causing them so much mental turmoil. You know, and it's like the same thing with that surgeon. You know, I'm sure she saved hundreds of thousands of people's lives, you know, and like, but she just got to a place where she was like, you know, and we were talking about the amount, because I used to work in kidney transplant as a nurse, so like I know, you know, surgery and surgeons' personalities is like the amount of precision and perfection that has to go in, like when you're literally saving someone's life in front of you. Like, it's like, of course that's like necessary to be the best surgeon ever, but like for your own self, like that is so hard. So you know, to not have support or some kind of outlet when you're doing that, it's just not normalized there, you know. It's just like, no wonder addiction is such a rampant thing. Or I remember the surgeon that I worked for, he was just constantly eating sugar all the time. Like I never saw him eating anything else. And it's just like, it's probably his way of just coping with how stressful that position is, you know?
Right. And so I think it's just impossible to always be on. And when you're on and you feel like you're swaying from that on position, you find coping mechanisms to help, you know, distract and derail, and then, you know, hoping that no one else will notice, but yet you're just doing more damage to yourself than you are for, you know, being a bit more open. And that's why I said, you know, I really embrace freedom and flexibility, because it's a whole new way to look at life and approach life, that it brings that curiosity and wonderment out there. So you're always present, you know, like you're looking for more and you're seeking for more and you're asking more. And it's just, but when you're on and you're perfect, it's just like this tunnel vision through like a pinhole, and it's so hard to see the world. So it's just you know, when you come full circle again, like finding it, getting crystal clear on you know, who you are, and that self-awareness journey brings light into those areas that you can now find and look up for like improvement on, and just asking for help. And you know, you got to get out of your own way first and take responsibility for how far you've gotten this, you know, in life right now. Because for us to get to that next level, we have to up level our thinking, up level our network, up level our community, up level, you know, the outside people that are helping us and pouring into us. So it's so important to really take an account for where you're currently at. And, you know, where you're currently at, is that going to continue getting you to that next level you desire?
Absolutely. I remember one of the first coaching calls that I was actually living in Melbourne, Australia. And like, you know, living the dream. I was in a leadership program there, and, you know, it was good. And I was, you know, seeing the world and all the different things, but I was isolated. I didn't have any friends. I wasn't like connecting with anybody like really well when I was there or anything like that. And I get onto one of my first coaching calls, and like immediately I just started crying my eyes out, because it's just like, it's just like waiting, you know, to like, who can I talk to? Who can I feel safe with to like let these emotions out, you know? And you know, just leaders in general, I think it's just such like a necessary thing that we need to, get past our own stuff and ask for help when we really need it, and not be embarrassed about it. Because, you know, I have one woman in my program right now, and she's just like, it's so like, she's like, it's so boring to talk about food. It's so embarrassing. She's like, it's so stupid, you know. It's just like, okay, you're judging your problem as being stupid, and consider the fact that that's why it's still a problem, is because you're not just saying like, this is an aspect of my life I have not mastered, and I'm terrible at it. And I really need help with this. Because I remember one of the first mastermind groups I was in, I was only like 25 or 4 or something like that. And I was in with a bunch of women who were, you know, 40s, 50s, 60s. And I had been in a relationship at the time for like 8 years. And I was so embarrassed and ashamed. Like, I didn't even want to say it. The fact that I wasn't sure I was happy in this relationship, because the modeling I had was my parents got together when they were 21, and they're still together today. So like, that's what I should be doing. And like, the fact that I don't know, and like, but then when they all open their mouth, they're like, Leslie, I'm 55 or 64, and I'm, you know, I've been divorced twice, or, you know, I still haven't figured it out, or I'm, you know, whatever. It's just like, oh my God, you know, and you just don't even think that that's like, everybody's dealing with that. And how, you know, for me at the time, it was like, age really didn't make a difference. It's like, it's just based on your past, what you've mastered or not mastered yet. And it's just owning what's still left to be uncovered. So no shame, talk about what you need, ask for help. There's no excuses today. YouTube is full of people that are just dying to help you get over what they were dealing with for so long. So yeah. Awesome. Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you guys being here. And again, the conversation's so juicy. I feel like I go into like the astral plane talking with you guys. It just all keeps happening. So thank you for being here. And how can people find you? And if you have your podcast, how else, or what else do you have going on?
Yeah. So, well, we have the podcast. It's the Confident Woman Podcast. Next, our Instagram handle is the Confident Woman Podcast. And we also have the Confident Woman Collective Instagram handle, the Confident Woman Collective. And so, you know, really, again, with the empowerment of women to becoming their best and most confident selves is really, you know, again, we can't do life alone. So let's do life and business together. And so that's really the purpose behind the Confident Woman Collective, is to bring community together. So it's led by a lot of guides, which are creators, coaches, leaders, experts in their niche and in their industry. And we all pour into each other, and we have classes to monthly masterminds to community meetings, and just, I mean, there's so many different facets to it. It's really hard to just like say it's one thing, because I think as women, we're not just one thing, and we don't have just one thing, and we're not one identity either. Right. So, you know, it really is about this community that comes together, that leans on and supports and talks about the hard things. But yet there's also women, like I said, that pour into them and show them ways and guide them through different areas of their life that, you know, maybe sticking points, or maybe foreseeing a hurdle or speed bump ahead of their journey that they may not be prepared for. But, you know, so that's the Confident Woman Collective. And then for me personally, my Instagram is, or actually all social media is I am Rachel Brooks. And so, you know, you can share, like, learn more about me and what we're building out in the Confident Woman brand and space as well.
Beautiful. Awesome.
Erin's got hers too.
My Instagram is the Erin Klein Show, with periods in between it to make it look cuter. And then Facebook, Erin McKay Klein. Those are the best places.
Awesome. Definitely check these ladies out. Thank you both for what you're doing. And again, putting out into the world such an awesome message. And for those of you who are ready to get past your food struggles and work on the real inner game that's preventing you from having total freedom from food, body, and weight, you can text the word hypnosis to 72727. Thanks guys so much. Have a great day.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Bye.